Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and if you're new to the channel here, I've watched every single summer playoff game for all regions. Yes, including that one, all 383 games. And this show here is dedicated to reviewing and recapping the events of every single day at Worlds. And we're at day 5 for Group A's round 2. And it goes almost exactly how I expected. Almost. There is some hope. There is some interesting aspects of the game. There is a lot of pent up, not aggression, but skill checking that needed to happen and that just didn't for some reason. And overall, a lot of fun games. It's top notch. 2 thumbs up. Maybe more if I had more hands. The overall sense, however, is that I'm a little concerned for the 2 teams that got eliminated. As foreshadow, both Cloud9 and Fnatic got eliminated as I expected. Not maybe everybody, but I didn't have any confidence with Cloud9 at all. And Fnatic just didn't strike me as consistent enough for me to think that they would edge out of groups at all. With that said, let's take a look at all the games that are reviewed, starting with the first one. Sometimes I'm going to get this intro thing right. In our first game of the day, we've got Fnatic, the 3rd seed of the LEC, versus Cloud9, the 1st seed of the LCS. A game that Cloud9 absolutely needed to win to keep their hopes alive for the group stage. We know how that ends, however. Keep it simple, stupid. KISS. What an awesome acronym. As Cloud9 decided to approach the all too easy draft, and all of a sudden, their vision approach, neutral control, and overall coordination increased tenfold. Who would have thought? Huge fan of the approach, as Fnatic seemed very slow this game. Both teams drafted virtually the same kind of composition and wound up holding very different levels of coordination. I think it is also super nice to see Cloud9 did not sit idly by trying to scale before really hitting their win conditions. They pushed the tempo and ballooned the gold excellently. There are moments in this game where they overforced, moments where they didn't quite recognize their limits and wound up almost throwing the game, but the desperation and lack of coordination from Fnatic helped them a lot. I'm worried at the lack of proactive answers Fnatic attempted, but there's only so much that can happen from here. My MVP for this game is Blabber, who created so many openings for Cloud9 that was really needed and pushed the tempo as hard as he could. In our second game of the day, we've got T1, the 2nd seed out of the LCK, versus Fnatic, the 3rd seed out of the LCS, or the LEC. Sorry. Fnatic are starting to concern me more and more as these games go over. The early game was immaculate, the tempo pushed to its limits, and T1 was having a hard time responding. The thing is, the lead that they built was not pushed to any other lanes, as Zeus and Gumayusi built up more and more strength. The second T1 had a 2k lead. Fnatic seemed only prepared to play the response and answer game, second to a play, and collapsed on the second they create an answer. T1, for their part, properly recognized where they needed to go to salvage a rough early game, and their proactivity was rewarded over and over again. The control and level-headed play out of T1 is fantastic, and are just one game away from qualifying to the best of 5. My MVP for this game is Gumayusi, who stepped up, pushed forward, and created space not just for himself, but for his team to respond. Third game of the day, we've got Cloud9 versus Edward Gaming. Cloud9 of the 1st seed of the LCS, Edward Gaming 3rd seed of the LPL. Another game that Cloud9 had to win to keep their hopes alive. Their hopes were crushed. Just absolutely. Because Edward Gaming are online. And here to make a point even. Cloud9 decided to go back to drafts that just don't work for them or their coordination, and you can tell The map movement was disjointed, vision play is not as strong, and there's a noticeable lack of early proactivity. What was there was snuffed out at the early dive attempts. Cloud9 should hold their head high given what has happened, that they showed some competitiveness and will still be able to play upset. Edward Gaming, for their part, did something that it took me a while to notice. The way they suffocated resources from Cloud9 forced the game to accelerate in a way that caught Cloud9 unaware. The sense that the game is really slow, and yet, by the time you look up, Edward Gaming's players are decked out as if it's been 30 minutes, but only 19 minutes has passed. That's really scary. The other team should look out, as it looks like they are set to qualify for the best of fives. My MVP for this game is Mako, who kept hitting hook after hook and zoned Cloud9 in ways that had them scattering to the wind. Our fourth game of the day, we've got Fnatic, the third seed of the LEC, versus Edward Gaming, the third seed of the LPL. The lack of proactivity, coordination, and overall confidence even leaves me baffled. Now, granted, this is the result I expected for this group, but this is not how I expected it to go down. Fnatic having such a lackluster round 2 is unfortunate, but it is a greater sign of some of their issues with being able to play the mid to late game if they're behind the curve after the early game. Edward Gaming, for their part, are still showing some rather scary uses of vision and map pressure to take a seemingly slow game and accelerate it to another level. How easily they nullified Fnatic attempts at any play and created stronger answers, all while avoiding to overstep their bounds. I do think that it is still a little slow, and facing a stronger team during the quarters may lead to some issues if they disrupt that flow, but as it is now, this is pretty effective. My MVP for this game is JJ, who was a zoning initiating machine, creating such a terrifying threat at all stages of the game. Beware the war pig. Our fifth game of the day is essentially just an exhibition match, which we have T1, the second seed of the LCK, versus Cloud9, the first seed of the LCS. This game was hilariously fun to watch. Not much to talk about regarding it outside of a few key things. First, T1 is terrifying at early game turret and based macros. Even while losing a whole lot of skirmishes, they got all 15 plates, which is usually unheard of, even in a game this absolutely ridiculous. And Cloud9 found something to really disrupt the rhythm of the game and capture the tempo for themselves. If we compare how Cloud9 played in this round 2, then it's incredible. It's just an incredible understanding of their own shortcomings and adapted to hold a stronger play. T1 still showed to be scary, but I'm still of the mindset that they won't get the next win against Edward Gaming, who look so on form. My MVP for this game is Gumayusi, who I think ended with triple the gold Berserker had. Oh, God. The final game of the day, the game that decides who was first and second seed, is Edward Gaming, the third seed of the LPL, versus T1, the second seed of the LCK. And there's anything inevitable, apparently, is T1 being first seed out of groups every year. Granted, I'm not going to lie. I thought that Edward Gaming would win, but very close. I thought the games were going to be close, but that they would edge out. Did not expect such a one-sided affair where the map pressure T1 offered became so insurmountable for Edward Gaming. Edward Gaming held such a solid approach to the proactive early gameplay, really punishing the positioning T1 opted into over and over again, but as they usually focus on one lane at a time, T1 would keep collecting plates, vision, and pressure around neutrals until Edward Gaming couldn't answer anything anymore. T1 still hold moments where they are way off base, their positioning too aggressive, with so much confidence that it slowed down the game rather frequently. Edward Gaming, for their part, had their eyes locked on Faker for some reason, just laser eyes, overcommitting on just getting him, which would work sometimes, but oh boy, does it usually backfire, as Carrier and Owner would create space that accentuated his juking abilities. Both these teams are scary going into the quarters, but T1 stamp themselves as really terrifying to face off. My MVP for this game is Faker for the amount of presence he commanded, creating a magnet towards himself for every Edward Gaming player. My expectations coming into this particular group was that I didn't think Cloud9 and Fnatic were going to make it. So I was correct on that. I did not expect, however, Fnatic to fumble so hard on the round 2. I did think that it was going to be a little bit closer than that. I did think that Cloud9 would bounce back and find some ways to mix things up. And I also thought that T1 would hold some of their more inconsistent approaches to the game that they've fallen prey to every so often as history comes down. And I guess I should have just looked at the history of how they do in groups and just assumed that they were going to get first place. But from the way the playoffs are going, Edward Gaming seemed like the more impressive, more consistent team, especially given their play style, just as it is. But no, I was wrong. It happens. I'll probably be wrong for a lot of other things in the same way that I was wrong about Rogue and their consistency, or what I was worried was probably going to be their consistency, and so on. The thing that I want to point out, though, mostly from my observation of the situation, is how, I mentioned it, Edward Gaming is slow. They were much slower in the way that they approach the game, and I do fear that, not because of the fact that they're slow is necessarily the wrong approach, because especially given the way that they were collecting gold, suffocating things, the slow nature of things, never really gave the chance for their opponents to balloon the leads, or not balloons, or turtle in a way that was effective to scale for the late game, to really contest anything that was happening later. So that's totally fine. My issue, though, is that they seem to be playing slow only once they've had a foothold in the early game. If they don't get a foothold in the early game, then they keep trying to really push the envelope of going really fast, trying to find any play, any catch. We got to go bot lane, really overwhelm that side of the map, and then immediately shoot up to the top side of the map and just bouncing back and forth. And I am wondering, as they'll head to a best of 5, whoever the team they end up against, that I don't see them doing so hot. Many of the teams, because in their best of 5 series, they're usually very close, but they're slow starter team. They usually fall behind fairly early in their best of 5s, and it was really rough to watch them play. And they got a bunch of really solid games against Royals, but I don't have the same kind of confidence seeing their performance here at groups that they'll perform any better during the best of 5 segments. But who knows? The best of 5 metas are very bizarre macro or microcosms of their opponents. So it really depends on the matchup on who they'll end up with. T1 for their part, though, I don't think that their first best of 5 will be a problem. Their second best of 5 might. We'll see. But that's because T1 is very methodical and very analytical about their approach to best of 5s, to a point where, given how they played today, how much pressure they gave all throughout, the non-stop pushing and the way they collect plates and their gold accumulation, not having necessarily to out-farm, out-lane, or really even out-skirmish at any given point, they will still out-accumulate gold from you in a way that's utterly terrifying and fantastic. I don't think that they're going to lose out their first round. But again, it really depends on matchups and so on and so forth. But I wouldn't want to be the team that faces T1 after seeing how they just smacked around this group. Faker is inevitable for quarterfinals. He has not missed a single quarterfinals ever. I think he's missed every world he's been in. He's gone to every quarterfinals, every semifinals, but not every finals, if I remember that correctly. So I don't think he'll lose the first one. He hasn't yet, And if history is anything to indicate, and the performance trend of T1, this could be Faker's redemption arc. I hope it is. It's why I named the group chat after, like, I really hope that he does win. I didn't expect him to win first in this group, but I really want him to win Worlds again, just like to make history just a little bit. That aside, Edward Gaming, I'm a little worried for their first best of 5. T1, I think they're a shoo-in no matter what. Or not no matter what, but for the vast majority of sequences. So long, Fnatic and Cloud9. It's fun while we had you for a very short and brief period. Fnatic, you came in absolutely thundering and then left whimpering. Cloud9, you came in whimpering, left us chuckling. But those are my thoughts, at least, of the day. We'll see how things turn out for the other groups and how things will match up after that, but one day at a time. Right now, congrats to EDG and T1. I want to hear what you have to think. Did you expect this particular result? Like, you were confident 100% T1 was going to get first place? Or were you surprised by some of the outcomes? Did you think that Fnatic was going to make it through, and then this 0-3 turnout in round 2 was really out of nowhere? Any and all of your thoughts I would love to hear in the comments down below. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. I've got a bunch of other videos on the sides over here for like the other teams that are qualified and all of my other videos regarding Worlds. I appreciate everybody who watches. It means a lot to me. And we got tomorrow where we're going to be watching Group B go off for their round 2. With that, see you next time.